All right, let's jump right in. Today we're taking a deep dive into the world of capybaras. We'll be exploring an essay called Capybara, Hydrochoerus, hydrochaeris, the world's largest rodent. Get ready to be surprised by these gentle giants. Did you know they can actually get to be like the size of a big dog?
Oh, yeah, it's true. They can weigh anywhere between 77 and 146 pounds, and some of them get to be 4.3 feet long. Not your average, hamster.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So, what makes these supersized rodent so well supersized?
Well, it's really all about their lifestyle, that semi-aquatic life, that barrel-shaped body and those short little legs. They aren't exactly built for speed on land, but in the water, it's a different story. They give them buoyancy and stability, and then you've got their webbed feet. Makes them pretty agile swimmers.
Like little torpedoes with teeth.
Yeah, you could say that.
The essay mentions that they're found in tons of different wetlands across South America. So why is water so important for them?
Well, think about it. In those wetlands, with all that thick vegetation, being big and strong, well, it's a huge advantage. Helps them push through all those grasses and reeds. And it also helps keep smaller predators away. But probably the biggest reason, I'd say, is that water offers them like a safe haven, from jaguars, anacondas, all those bigger threats.
Makes sense. So it's like their escape route.
Exactly. When there's danger, they slip into the water, poof, they're gone. And they're good at holding their breath, too, sometimes for minutes at a time. It's like their own little invisibility cloak.
I love that. But the essay also says they aren't always alone in these watery hideouts. They're actually, like, pretty social, right?
Oh, absolutely. They live in groups, sometimes 10 to 20 individuals, sometimes, get this, even up to 100.
Wow. So what are the benefits of, being in such a big group?
Well, for starters, safety in numbers, right? More eyes means a better chance of spotting a predator early on. And remember how we talked about their escape route? It works best when they can get the jump on the predator. So a big group, it just means more chances for someone to sound the alarm and everyone makes a quick getaway.
Makes sense. A species that spends so much time chilling would need a strategy to stay safe without too much effort. But with that many mouths to feed, what do these giant rodents eat?
They're actually, believe it or not, strict herbivores. So mostly grasses, aquatic plants, and fruits.
Huh. So basically giant lawnmowers, keeping the wetlands nice and tidy.
Huh. That's a great way to put it. There is one thing about their diet, though, that might surprise you. It's a little gross. They practice something called coprophagy.
What? That sounds a bit, unsavory.
Yeah, basically it means they eat their own droppings.
Okay. Did not see that coming. But why would they do that?
Well, from a biological standpoint, it makes sense. Capybaras, like a lot of herbivores, have a hard time breaking down cellulosics in plants. So they evolved this interesting strategy to get the most out of their meals. By eating their droppings, they're basically giving their food a second run through the digestive system. That way, they can break down those tough fibers more efficiently.
So it's like their own personal recycling system.
Exactly. It might seem weird to us, but it's a really effective way for them to get all the nutrients they can from their food.
Wow. Nature's pretty amazing, isn't it? But even with their size, their social groups, and their resourceful eating habits, they still have things to worry about, right?
Oh, of course. Every animal has predators. And the essay mentions quite a few jaguars, anacondas, caimans, even big birds of prey like harpy eagles.
So how do they stay safe with so many dangerous predators out there?
Well, we talked about their underwater escape, but they've got other tricks too.
Ooh, do tell.
Okay, so remember those eyes, ears, and nostrils, the ones placed high up on their heads. Well, those adaptations play a big part. Those features let them stay almost completely underwater, but still keep an eye out for danger.
It's like they're built for stealth.
Right. And those webbed feet we talked about, they're not just good for swimming, they also give them great traction in mud. Helps them get around in those dense wetlands.
So they're masters of their environment, in the water and out.
You got it. They really have evolved some pretty amazing ways to survive in tough places.
And the essay says they're not endangered right now, which is great news.
Yeah, that's good news. But they do have some challenges, especially when it comes to us, humans.
Oh, that's a bit concerning. What are we doing that's impacting them?
Well, one of the biggest issues is habitat loss. As we keep developing land for farming, for housing, for all sorts of things, we often end up encroaching on wetlands. And those wetlands are like crucial for capybaras. This loss of habitat squeezes them into smaller and smaller areas, and that means more competition for resources and makes them more vulnerable to predators.
It's like a ripple effect,
Yeah.
our actions having these consequences we don't always think about. But are there any positive ways that humans and capybaras interact?
Absolutely. In some places, capybaras are actually a big draw for ecotourism. Their chill vibe and their unique look and makes them a big attraction for visitors. And that can actually be a good thing for the local economy and help raise awareness about the need for conservation.
So everyone wins.
Mm.
People get to see these amazing animals, and the capybaras benefit from the attention and protection.
Exactly. It shows how, sometimes humans and wildlife can actually benefit each other, but it's important to remember to do it responsibly, always thinking about the animal's well-being.
That's a really good point. We need to make sure our interactions don't end up hurting them or messing up their natural behaviors. Now, before we go on, I'm curious, what stood out to you the most so far? Is it their size or their diet? Or maybe how they can just disappear into water like that?
For me, I think it's how adaptable they are. They've figured out how to thrive in a pretty tough environment. They've got these amazing strategies for everything, from getting food to escaping predators. It's remarkable.
Yeah, it really is. It shows how resilient and resourceful they are. And speaking of resourcefulness, let's dig a little deeper into their social structure. We'll pick up there after the break. Stay tuned. So, before the break, we were talking about how adaptable capybaras are. And I'm really curious about their social structure. The essay mentioned something about a dominant male. Is it like he's the king of the capybaras ruling over all the others?
Well, not quite a king, but yeah, there is a hierarchy in those big groups. The dominant male, he's usually the biggest and strongest one. He gets first dibs on things like mating.
Yeah.
And the best spots for grazing or, just hanging out in the sun.
So size does matter in the capybara world.
I guess, to some extent.
Right.
But it's not just about being big and strong. They use a bunch of signals to establish dominance, things like scent marking, making certain sounds, even chasing rivals away from the group.
Kind of a combination of like physical presence and social strategy.
Right. It's pretty fascinating to see how these chill creatures, navigate all those social dynamics. And even with that hierarchy, capybara groups are, for the most part, peaceful. They've actually got some good strategies for keeping things calm and avoiding conflict.
It's funny to picture like all these giant rodents just lounging around, enjoying the sun, munching on grass, and maybe giving each other the stink eye every now and then. Not exactly a cutthroat battle for power.
Exactly. And I think that's probably because they live in a pretty abundant environment, In wetlands, they usually have plenty of food and water, so there's not as much need to compete fiercely. Plus, they have a pretty complex way of communicating with each other. They use all sorts of sounds like whistles, clicks, even barks and purrs to let each other know what's up and stay connected.
Sounds like a pretty mellow social life. But even in those peaceful wetlands, they still got to watch out for those predators, right?
Yeah.
Jaguars, anacondas, all those guys. How do they manage to stay safe with all those threats around?
Well, that's where those incredible adaptations come in. Like we talked about, their escape tactic is diving into the water, holding their breath. But their physical features are super important too.
You mean like the eyes, ears, and nostrils high up on their heads so they can stay underwater and still be aware of what's going on?
Exactly. They blend in with the water so well, they're practically invisible to predators. And those webbed feet, remember those? Not just for swimming. They give them amazing traction in mud so they can move easily in those dense, sometimes slippery wetlands.
It's like they're one with their watery world. But I wonder, with all those adaptations for wetlands, how are they affected by, like, human stuff, the things we do that change the environment?
That's a big question, and it's something we should be concerned about. We already talked about habitat loss, right? How human development is a threat. But it's not just the loss of physical space, it's also how we mess with that delicate balance in the wetlands, the balance that capybaras need to survive.
Yeah, it's like we don't always think about how our actions can disrupt things.
Right. When we break up their habitat, it can isolate different groups of capybaras, and that makes them more vulnerable to disease, and it limits their gene pool. Plus, it messes up their movement patterns, makes it harder to get to the resources they need.
It's kind of a bummer to think about, like how much we're affecting their world. But didn't the essay say there are some positive interactions between humans and capybaras too? Something about ecotourism.
Oh, yeah, for sure. In some areas, they're a big draw for tourists. I mean, they're so gentle and they look so unique. People love seeing them in their natural habitat. Just imagine you're on a boat going through a peaceful wetland, and suddenly there's this group of giant rodents hanging out by the water. It's pretty cool.
It's like a scene from a nature documentary. No wonder people are fascinated by them.
And that fascination can actually be a good thing for conservation. Ecotourism is bring money into the local communities, which encourages them to protect those wetlands and animals that live there.
So it's like we can actually align what's good for us with what's good for them.
Exactly. It's about finding ways for humans and wildlife to, coexist peacefully and benefit from each other. But we got to remember to do it the right way, always thinking about the animals and what's best for them.
That's so important. Now, one thing that surprised me is that capybaras are related to guinea pigs. I mean, they're like completely different sizes. How is that even possible?
I know, right? It seems crazy. But when you really look at them, their anatomy, their behavior, you can kind of see the family resemblance. They both have those, you know, those rodent teeth. They're both herbivores, and they both live in social groups. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it just shows how much diversity there is in nature and how sometimes the most unexpected animals are connected.
Definitely. It's amazing how life on Earth has evolved to fill all these different niches.
So true. Now, before we move on to our last segment, I'm curious, what stood out to you the most about capybaras so far? Anything in particular that's, really grabbed your attention?
Well, I think it's their ability to just thrive even when things are tough. They live in a changing, unpredictable environment, but they've adapted so well. They've got all these amazing strategies for surviving. It's really impressive.
It's a good reminder that even with all the challenges out there, there's still room for, wonder and resilience in nature.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenges, let's finish up by talking about the impact of climate change on capybaras. We'll get into that and more in the final part of our deep dive.
So we've talked a lot about how capybaras live and all their cool adaptations, but I gotta wonder, with climate change and everything, how's that going to affect them?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I mean, their lives are so tied to wetlands, to the water levels, the plants, the temperature. Everything's got to be just right.
And wetlands are like some of the most vulnerable ecosystems to climate change, right?
Exactly. I mean, we're already seeing changes, higher temperatures, changes in rainfall, more extreme weather, droughts and floods, and all that can really mess with the balance in wetlands. It affects everything, from the plants to the animals that depend on them.
It's like a domino effect, right?
Yeah.
One thing leads to another, and the whole ecosystem gets disrupted.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine a really bad drought. Suddenly there's less food for the capybaras, the grasses and plants they depend on. Or on the flip side, what if there's a huge flood? It could force them to leave their homes, make them go find somewhere else, and it might not be as good.
It's like their whole world is changing, and they have to figure out how to survive.
Yeah, it makes things unpredictable for sure. And then there are the long-term effects too. Those changes in temperature and rain, they can help invasive plants spread, and that changes the whole makeup of the wetlands, which can be bad for the native plants that capybaras need.
It really hits home. Climate change isn't just some abstract thing. It's affecting real animals, like capybaras, in really concrete ways.
It is, and it's especially concerning for animals like them that depend on an environment that's already under pressure from, habitat loss and all the other stuff we do.
It sounds pretty bad. Is there any hope for capybaras with all these challenges?
Well, it's definitely a tough situation, but I wouldn't say there's no hope. Scientists and conservationists, they're working hard to figure out exactly how climate change is impacting capybaras and their habitats. And they're coming up with ways to to lessen those impacts.
That's good to hear. What are they doing?
One of the big things is protecting the wetlands that are already there,
Yeah.
making sure they have enough water, getting rid of invasive plants, reducing pollution from farms and industry. It's all about giving capybaras the best chance they can get.
So it's about preserving what they have left.
Yeah. But they're also looking at creating corridors, like pathways between different wetland areas that have become separated. That way, capybara populations can move around more easily, which helps with the genetic diversity and, makes them less vulnerable if something bad happens in one specific area.
It's like building bridges between islands of good habitat so they have more options.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And it's not just about science, it's about Getting local communities involved, educating people about why capybaras are important and why we need to protect them.
It shows how conservation really needs everyone to work together.
Exactly. In the end, the future of capybaras